briefing on the next session, which is going to be on execution. This is going to be uh, a bit simpler as compared to some of the other sessions because there's no like simulation. And it's largely schema based, so it's not very complicated. The only thing that's a little bit different that we're trying this time is one of the activities where instead of doing like a simulation where people choose responses, we want them to actually give us responses like real time, like talk on the mic and give us the responses. So I'll just walk you guys through that when we come to that role play activity. But other than that, it's pretty much pretty straightforward. We're going to go over the execution schema. We're going to spend some time on the business context, go through each of the domains, show a video, do a mimic tool for the business context, then come back for the people context. And then the same thing where we go through each of the 4 domains and then have an activity on the people context, which is on the role plays. And then we end the session. So it's about a 3.5 hour agenda, and it should be pretty straightforward. So I'll just quickly walk you guys through the slides. Right, all this stuff the team will take care of. You don't need to worry about this. Okay, so we start off with a recap of strategic thinking, all the 3-4 things that we considered. And then, of course, the where to play, how to win framework. And then we jump right into execution. Right, so in terms of execution, you'll have a few speaker notes over here about why it's important and stuff like that. It's also important, like while you're talking about strategic thinking, just to kind of give that link between making a strategy and actually executing it, which is why we are kind of doing these 2 back to back. So you'll need to maybe give a little bit of a narrative around how it's as critical to execute your plans well as it is to make them. We'll give you some notes about this, but of course, feel free to add some of your own experiences or own examples on top of that. When it comes to execution, like I said, it's mostly very schema driven. So we're going to talk about the 2 contexts, business context and the people context, one after the other. So let's go into the first one. Right. So on the first one, the business context, we have our usual 4 domains. Each of these domains have a couple of pointers associated with them. So if you go to the next page, and as usual, each of these have their speaker notes with recommended examples and things like that. And as usual, you can add on to that with your own examples, no problem. Once we go through these 4 domains, we have a video, which is of Arundhati Bhattacharya, which nicely kind of covers some 3 or 4 of these domains. We've also given you some narrative here about how that video talks to those domains and what are some of the key takeaways. So up to here, it's pretty straightforward. Break. Let's go to the mimic tool. Okay, so over here, like typically, like if we were doing this in a physical workshop setting, this would be like a something that you do individually, because it's all about figuring out within your teams who are the best people to do the best things. So here, obviously, we can't do that. So we're slightly modifying the mimic tool to kind of do it as a group, right? So to do that, what we've done is, most of these guys are anyways branch managers. So what we're going to do is to ask them, like, what are those 3 or 4 key deliverables that a branch manager, top of mind has to worry about, or what are those key outcomes that a branch manager has to drive. This should be pretty straightforward for them, since, like I said, about 70% of our participant pool is branch managers. So you'll have at least some 20-30 branch managers in your group. So once we get these 3, 4 deliverables from them, like, and it could be things like increase customer base, increase our CASA, or increase or reduce our turnaround times for certain activities, reduce operating costs. Like, it could be pretty generic deliverables, and that's totally fine. Um, let's go to the next page. So then what we do is we ask them that, think about the teams that you have, and think about what does your team like to do? What are the most valuable things that some of the members in your team do? What strengths do various people bring? And over here, the idea is to not get them to talk about individuals, but to say that, things like my single window operators know how the back end system works very well, or my sales guys are very motivated by driving numbers for the branch and things like that, right? Uh, so kind of try to keep that conversation in that vein. Obviously, we can't get into individual people, but in general, what are some of the things that they notice? Also, Drashti, we are not doing this in breakouts, right? We're doing this in the main room.
No, Aditya, we are doing this
Okay.
with one breakout. So
Okay,
the main
one
room
breakout.
is one breakout.
Got it. Okay. So in general, you'll have probably about 20 people in each group, one in the main room and one in the breakout. So, um, and given our experience, we have maybe 4 or 5 people talking, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue to, get these guys to fill out the mimic tool. The broad idea of the mimic tool is that you identify deliverables, you identify various factors that you would consider before you assign people to deliverables, and that again obviously ties back to our schema. Let me pause here in case there are any questions up to this point and the first part of the uh, presentation. Okay, let's go ahead. Okay. Second part of the schema is around the people context. So again, there are these 4 domains, very, very straightforward. Things like clarity of expectations, making sure the metrics are right, and so on and so forth. So uh, very, very straightforward stuff. Again, we have examples for you in the speaker notes. You can add whatever you want to that. Um, Coming to the role play, uh, essentially, instead of doing it as a simulation where, they see things and then we read them out and then things like that, we're trying to make it a little bit more interactive over here. So let's go ahead. Drashti. Okay, so basically for each of these uh, domains, like expectations, metrics, and so on, we've tried to like give them like some kind of a situation, a couple of characters talking to each other and stuff, and then ask them like, in this situation, what would you do, right? So I'll just go through the slide and maybe Drashti can take you guys through the actual situations in a little bit of detail after that. But essentially, like you saw, there are 2 characters. They're having a conversation, and uh, uh, what we need from the participants is that, what could this leader have done better, and also to kind of get them to reflect on, how do you set expectations with your team members, and do you see anything that resonates over here, right? Is there something that you would change based on that? So essentially, the idea is to get some kind of conversation interaction going with the participants here, not as mechanical as filling out the mimic tool, right? And we have similar like situations for the other domains as well. This whole activity is planned for about 60 minutes. So the idea is to take them through each situation in about 5 odd minutes, and then maybe spend 10 minutes in just getting them to talk, get people's views in and stuff like that. And the team will be filling it into this text box live in front of everyone. So that should that should also be something that they can see, like as they're giving in the views. Um, let's go on. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the end of the session. So like I said, very straightforward agenda, like two parts of the schema, about 7-8 slides on the theory aspect of it, one mimic tool and one role play. Any questions, reactions? Okay. Yeah, Nidhi, you were saying something?
No, I was just nothing special. I was saying it looks fairly straightforward, and maybe if we just look at quickly look at the role play
Sure.
script, so to speak. That's all.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it looks quite doable.
Yeah, exactly. So, Drashi, do you want to just walk over the simulation? I mean, the situations rather. I mean, you don't need to read out the entire script, but just give everyone an idea of what the broad situation is and what are the kind of things you want people to talk about.
Sure. All right. So for the role plays, one, we'll be having it on the main group. So we are not going to breakouts. And we'll have two people from our team. So from the Bank of Baroda team, play the two characters and do the role play. So we will not need the facilitators to, read out the part around the role play, the dialogues. We'll have two people from our team do that. And they will, we've ensured that, we are conversant with the dialogue, so it goes smoothly. In terms of the storyline or the premise for each of these role plays, every role play has two characters, a reporting manager or a boss and a reportee or a subordinate to that person. In terms of the first one, which is expectations, it is a conversation between the boss, who is Samir, and the reporting person whose name is Nida. The conversation lies around the fact that while Samir is happy with what Nida is doing in terms of her project work, he feels that she has potential for more and is not taking on challenging work. Nida, on the other hand, is very comfortable doing, work that she's good at, that she's always done, rather than exploring new areas and challenging herself. And then the role play ends with us trying to find out that, what could have Samir done to set expectations better. So it's very clear from the role play that Nida is not aware of what Samir expects of her, probably because he's not been as explicit in terms of his expectation setting. And then we have a generic question which we want participants to answer, which is somewhat like we would have asked if there were a mimic tool. So which is around how do you set expectations with your team members? So this participants have to answer keeping their own role in mind, their own team in mind. The second role play that we have is a combination for metrics as well as feedback. And over here, the conversation between Arohi, who is the senior manager or, the boss, and Meher, who is the reporting person. The conversation here lies around the fact that Arohi is giving some sort of, feedback related to Meher's work. And the thing that she does not do correctly is that in terms of feedback, she starts off on a negative note. If we were to go through the slide around the domain for feedback, it talks about the fact that it is always a good practice to start off with positive feedback. Feedback is not always about pointing out just the negatives or the development areas, which is what this lady Arohi does. She goes about pointing out what Meher has not been doing well, rather than focusing on the one thing that she's also done really well. Also, the fact that when she's pointing out her performance, she does not have a very clear metric at all places. So, she's not aware of whether a certain thing that she's pointing out was a part of her goal sheet or not. And the domain around metric clearly states that, when you want to compare a certain person's performance, you should, there should be no gray area. There should be no scope for speculation. It should be a total black and white. Also, it is okay to compare performance with a peer, but you should have a logical benchmark to do the same. which at a couple of points in the conversation you will see missing while Arohi is giving the feedback to her. Again, over here, three basic questions around, asking the participants whether or not Arohi used the correct metric to give the performance, and what kind of metric would they have used had they been in her place. In terms of feedback, asking the participants if the feedback process was, done properly or followed well, and then asking them as to how do they give feedback to their team members. So again, that is a question they answer, keeping themselves and their team in mind. The last role play is a very short one, just a 2 dialogue role play, recognition, which is where this person who is the boss, Yash, is doing everything right. So he gives, he recognizes his reportee in a meeting, in a team meeting, which is a good thing to do. And also does not recognize her for her everyday work, which is ideally something which is expected. Rather than that, recognizes her for something that she's done really well, which is over and above her work, which clearly indicates that he wants to recognize performance which is exceptional and just regular work which she's done well. And over here, the questions around, because he's done it well, ask participants what do they think, what are the points where you did well in terms of giving or recognizing Sarah's efforts. And then again, the generic question around how do you recognize performance for your team members. So yes, you're just these three role plays. The expectation is that we don't think they should take, along with the input, should take more than 15 minutes for sure. We've still budgeted for a hour in all for this, so that we are sure that we don't spill over in terms of time.
So Drashti, Sharmishta here.
Yeah, Sharmishta.
So these role plays are going to be done in the breakout rooms, right? The 2 breakout rooms. And
no. The mimic tool will be done in the breakout rooms. This role play will be done on the main call. We'll have 2 people from our team. Say for example, there's Nandita and there's Sumati, who are the 2 characters who will read out the entire piece. And then if you are the facilitator, you will take on the part which is around this slide where you have to actually ask the questions and debrief the entire thing.
Okay, so basically we ask the participants what did they think and where could have things, what was done well, what was not done well.
Yes. So this will happen on a Glaxoon board where we'll take inputs from participants and pin them down like we do for Mimic tools as well.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, any other questions?
No, I think it's quite clear.
Yep. Okay, great. Okay, so we can give you like 35 minutes back in that case. So thanks everyone for joining, and we'll share this deck with you. And if you have any questions, of course, please reach out to us.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Aditya.
Thanks everyone.
Bye. Thank you. That was quick.
Yep.
So this, therefore, session won't reach to 4 hours, right? It should actually max.
So it's planned for about 3.5, but so far we always get a lot of delays in terms of people joining and tech issues and stuff like that. So it goes to 4 hours.
Yeah, so it depends on how the team, the batch is really.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
I'm just wondering, one challenge something that I faced when we were doing collaboration, they might say that, ma'am, hum to ye sara cheez karte hain, we do all of it. So what's new? So I am just thinking, how do I still make them see a value? Probably we can say that, which is a good news. Probably you can continue doing that. I guess anything that any one of you can think of.
Yeah, so see, the idea is that, a schema is like a mental model, right, to do things. And for some people would probably be doing that intuitively. But for those of them who don't do it intuitively, like it's a good way to build those behaviors. So, if they do it already, great for them. But,
just a
we want
refresh.
correct. So, But there'll be a lot of people who don't do it regularly. So it's a good way for them to build up those behaviors.
So Linakshi, Nidhi here, one of the things we could do if somebody does that, ask them quickly for, all right, can you very quickly give us an example of how you have actually implemented it or practiced it out so others can learn from what you have done. So at least get...
That's when the
Good
mic
idea.
is working.
That's right. Why mics never work for them.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.